You don't have a money problem. You have a retention problem. It sounds harsh, but if you stop and look at the math, it's a truth so uncomfortable it'll make your skin crawl. Look around you. You aren't unemployed. You're actually working harder than ever. 8, 10, maybe 12 hours a day grinding for some multinational empire. You even earned more this year than you did last year. Yet, every New Year's Eve, your savings account is a dark joke. That ghost of financial anxiety, it's still haunting you, and it's not because you're lazy. It's because the system doesn't want you to be wealthy. It needs you to be the perfect consumer. The perfect consumer is a ghost in the machine, someone who earns, spends every cent on things they don't truly need, and then crawls back to the office to pay off the debt. You're standing in a financial matrix, a precision-engineered web designed to bleed you dry before you even realize the money is gone. Your greatest enemy isn't a low salary. It's the fact that you've lost control over your own survival. You think you're free to shop, but you're just choosing the color of the invisible golden chains around your neck. Welcome to the invisible driver, where there are truths that society doesn't want you to know. Let's be real. Every time you open your phone, you aren't just browsing. You are entering a war zone where your bank account is the casualty. Silicon Valley doesn't hire just coders anymore. They hire neuroscientists. Their goal: to hack your lizard brain and trigger a dopamine hit every time you see a limited time offer or a recommended for you tab. Think about the Amazon Buy Now button. It's not there for your convenience. It's there to exploit what I call the 3-second lethal window. See, it takes the human brain about 3 to 5 seconds to move from an emotional impulse to a logical evaluation. If they can make you click in under 3 seconds, your logic never even wakes up. You've committed financial suicide before you've even realized you were holding the weapon. You think you're in control? TikTok and Instagram are digital slot machines. Every scroll is a pull of the lever. When the algorithm detects you're feeling lonely or stressed after a long day at work, it doesn't show you a savings plan. It shows you that $200 pair of sneakers or that tech gadget you saw in a viral video. It's an unfair fight. $1 billion AI versus your tired, overworked brain. The lesson here is simple but brutal. If a purchase feels like a rush, it's a trap. If it's instant, it's designed to bleed you. Your first act of rebellion is to break that 3-second window. Wait 24 hours. Let the dopamine fade and watch how that must-have item suddenly looks like overpriced plastic. But here is the scary part. Why didn't anyone tell us about this? Why were we taught how to solve for X in high school, but never how to defend ourselves against the most sophisticated psychological warfare in human history? To understand that, we have to look at the very place where the Matrix begins its conditioning, which brings us to the education trap. Ask yourself this: why do you know the Pythagorean theorem by heart, but you have no idea how a tax bracket works? Why did they teach you about the anatomy of a frog, but never about the anatomy of a mortgage? It's not an accident. It's a design choice. The modern American school system was modeled after the 19th century Prussian factory system. Its primary goal wasn't to produce innovators or free thinkers. It was to produce compliant workers, people who show up on time, follow instructions, and don't ask too many questions about where the money is going. At 18, before you're even allowed to buy a beer, the system encourages you to sign your name on a dotted line for $50,000 or $100,000 in student loans. They call it an investment in your future. I call it the first shackle. You enter the workforce already owing the system a decade of your life. You are born into a debt trap where you're taught that a high-paying job is the only way out. But here's the brutal irony. Even if you get that high-paying job, you've never been taught how to manage the money that comes with it. You've been trained to be a high-performance engine for someone else's machine, but no one gave you the keys to your own vehicle. You graduate with a degree in one hand and a death sentence in the other, completely blind to the fact that you've been set up to fail from day one. And this leads to a phenomenon that is haunting millions of Americans right now. It's the reason why people making six figures are still living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in a sea of luxury debt. Because even when you start making real money, the Matrix has another, even more subtle trap waiting for you. The $100,000 broke club. In the United States, we've been sold a lie that a six-figure salary is the finish line. We think that once we hit that $100,000 mark, the struggle ends. But for millions of Americans, it's just the beginning of a faster, more expensive treadmill. Welcome to the six-figure broke club. It starts with a parasite called lifestyle creep. You get that big promotion, and suddenly, that reliable Toyota doesn't feel premium enough for your new title. So, you trade it in for a $700 a month Tesla lease. You move from your cozy apartment to a luxury condo with a gym you never use. You start trading your time for convenience. Uber Eats every night, $15 cocktails every weekend, and a Peloton gathering dust in the corner. By the end of the month, even with that fat paycheck, you're still checking your banking app with a knot in your stomach, wondering where it all went. You've become a high earner, not rich yet, or what the system calls a Henry. You're working 60 hours a week just to maintain an image of success for people who don't even like you. The lesson is this: the Matrix doesn't care if you earn $40,000 or $400,000. As long as your expenses rise at the same rate as your income, you are still a slave. You are building wealth. You're just a more expensive station for money to pass through before it returns to the hands of the banks. But here is the truly terrifying part. Even if you manage to resist the urge to buy a new car or a bigger house, even if you live like a monk and save every penny, there is a silent thief standing right behind you. A thief that the system actually invited into your living room to pick your pocket while you sleep. To see this thief, we have to look at the very air we breathe in this economy. We have to talk about the silent thief. Imagine a thief who doesn't break into your house at night, but instead breaks into your bank account every single second of every single day. This thief doesn't take your physical dollars. He just takes what those dollars can do. In the textbooks, they call it inflation. In the Matrix, it's a social engineering tool. Think about it. If your money held its value forever, you might eventually save enough to stop working. You'd be free. But the system needs you on that treadmill. So they've engineered a way to make your savings leak energy. Since 1970, the US dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. That means if you worked 100 hours to save $1,000 back then, that same $1,000 today represents only a fraction of that labor. The system effectively stole the hours of your life you spent earning that money. It's a hidden tax that requires no vote and no approval. Every time the Federal Reserve prints more money, they are diluting your sweat, your late nights, and your sacrifices. They are forcing you to work harder and longer just to stay in the same place. It's the ultimate carrot on a stick. You're running faster, but the finish line is being moved by a group of bankers in a boardroom you'll never enter. The lesson is a bitter pill to swallow. In this system, saving cash is actually a form of slow financial suicide. You are storing your life's energy in a bucket with a hole in the bottom. But as if this invisible thief wasn't enough, the Matrix has deployed a fleet of smaller, digital parasites to finish the job. They don't take your wealth in big chunks. They drain it one tiny drop at a time, so slowly you'll barely feel the sting, until your veins are dry. To see these parasites, we have to look at the apps on your phone. We have to talk about digital leeching.
In the old world, you bought a thing, you owned it, and that was the end of the transaction. But the Matrix realized that one-time sales are bad for the bottom line. They don't want your money once. They want a pipe connected directly from your pocket to their vault, forever. Welcome to the era of digital leeching. It's the sassification of your entire existence. Think about your daily life. You don't own your music. You rent it from Spotify. You don't own your movies. Bounties are paid monthly to Netflix and Disney+. You don't even own the software you use for work. You lease it from Adobe or Microsoft. In some cases, you don't even own the features in your car anymore. Want heated seats in your BMW? That'll be a monthly subscription too. Individually, these $10 or $15 charges feel harmless. They're designed to stay just below your pain threshold. But collectively, they form a digital net that entangles your freedom. The average American now spends over $200 a month on subscriptions they often don't even use. That's $2,400 a year. Over 10 years, with modest interest, that's a $30,000 hole in your net worth. This is the end of ownership. The system wants a world where you own nothing and rent everything, because a person who rents their lifestyle can never truly walk away. You are paying for the illusion of access while sacrificing the reality of wealth. The lesson is a wake-up call. Audit your bank statement like a forensic investigator. Every auto-pay is a leak in your fortress. If you aren't using it, kill it. Reclaim your capital. But even if you plug every leak and cut every cord, the system still has its eyes on you. It's not just watching what you spend, it's grading your obedience through a number that determines your status in society. A number most people think is a badge of honor, but is actually a digital leash. To find out who truly controls your future, we have to talk about the obedience rating. We've been conditioned to view a high credit score as a digital badge of honor. We brag about our 800 FICO score as if it's a certificate of financial genius. But what if I told you that your credit score isn't a measure of how much wealth you have? It's an obedience rating. The system doesn't care how much money you have in the bank. In fact, if you have $1 million in cash but zero debt, the system might give you a mediocre score or even label you as having a thin file. Why? Because the Matrix cannot extract interest from a person who doesn't owe anything. Think about two neighbors. One lives a modest life, pays for everything in cash, and has $50,000 in a savings account. Their credit score is average at best. The other neighbor has a massive mortgage, 2 luxury car leases, and 10 credit cards. They are 3 payroll cycles away from total bankruptcy. But because they make every minimum payment on time, they have a perfect 800 score. The system rewards the person who stays in the cage, provided they keep the cage clean. It's a digital leash designed to keep you borrowing, because as long as you are borrowing, you are working for the banks. You aren't building a legacy. You're building a reputation for being a good debtor. The lesson here is a cold shower. Stop playing the credit game to impress the banks. A high credit score only matters if you plan to stay in debt.
Your goal shouldn't be a higher score. It should be a higher net worth. But even if you win the credit game and get that perfect mortgage, do you really own that home? Or are you just a high-level tenant for the real masters of the economy? To understand who actually holds the keys to the world, we have to look at the giant standing behind the curtain. We have to talk about the ownership illusion.
You've probably asked yourself lately, why is the American dream becoming a nightmare? Why is it that even with a good job, buying a home feels like trying to win a race where the finish line keeps moving 10 miles further every time you get close? It's because you aren't just bidding against other families anymore. You are bidding against ghosts, trillion-dollar ghosts. Meet the real architects of the Matrix, institutional giants like BlackRock and Vanguard. While you were sleeping, these behemoths were busy buying up tens of thousands of single-family homes across the country, often paying cash and outbidding regular people by 30 or 40%. They don't want to sell these houses to you. They want to rent them back to you. We are moving into what economists call the rent-all economy. It's a world where the physical earth beneath your feet is being transformed into a permanent subscription service. If they own the houses, the cars, and the tools you use to work, they own you. You become a permanent line item on their balance sheet, a reliable source of yield for their shareholders. The strategy is simple. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. But they forgot to mention the second part. If you own nothing, you have no leverage. You have no place to stand that isn't subject to someone else's terms and conditions. The lesson. Here is the ultimate red pill. True freedom is impossible without ownership. If you don't own your assets, you are just a guest in your own life, waiting for the landlord to raise the price of your existence. But how do you fight back against a trillion-dollar algorithm? How do you carve out a piece of the world when the game is rigged? You don't do it by playing by their rules. You do it by building your own fortress, a financial weapon designed to give you the one thing the system fears most. To find that weapon, we need to talk about the Freedom Fund. If the system is built on your dependence, then the ultimate act of rebellion is to become independent. But you can't fight a trillion-dollar empire in a head-on battle. You need a guerrilla warfare strategy. You need a freedom fund. Most people follow a formula for financial suicide. Income minus expenses equals savings. But in that equation, you are at the very bottom of the priority list. You pay the landlord, the grocery store, and the streaming services first, and then you give yourself the leftovers. You're treating yourself like a beggar in your own life. We are flipping the script. The new formula is income minus freedom fund equals spending. Think of this fund as your buyout price. It's the money that allows you to look a toxic boss in the eye and say, no. It's the money that buys you the time to walk away from a soul-crushing corporate grind and find a new path. This isn't a boring emergency fund your grandma talked about. This is your resistance capital. Start with 10%. If you can, push it to 20%. The moment that money leaves your checking account and enters your freedom fund, it is no longer currency. It is a soldier. And that soldier's only job is to fight for your time. The lesson is simple. Wealth is not the ability to buy things. Wealth is the ability to own your hours. If you spend everything you earn, you are just a high-paid prisoner. But the moment you start paying yourself first, you are officially part of the resistance. But even when you start building your fortress, there is one more trap the system uses to keep you confused. It's a mental trick that makes you value the wrong things, ensuring that even if you have money, you still feel poor. To break this final spell, we have to rethink how we measure the world.
we have to talk about the time value matrix. To truly break free, you must stop looking at price tags in dollars and start looking at them in life force. In the matrix, they want you to focus on affordability. Can you afford the monthly payment? Can you put it on a credit card? But the reality is much darker. Money is just a medium for your time, and time is the only non-renewable resource you possess. When you spend money, you are literally trading away a piece of your mortality. Let's do the math on a common American dream, a $50,000 truck or SUV. If you earn $25 an hour after taxes, that vehicle doesn't cost $50,000. It costs 2,000 hours of your life. That is 1 full year of working 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. Think about that. 1 entire year of your existence, every commute, every stressful meeting, every hour spent away from your children or your passions, just to own a piece of metal that loses 10% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. Was that year of your life worth it? The system loves low monthly payments because it hides the true cost in life force. It makes the chains feel lighter, so you don't notice how long they actually are. The lesson is a shift in perspective. Before every purchase, ask yourself, how many hours of my life am I willing to die for this? When you view the world through this lens, the latest iPhone or the designer shoes lose their magic. You start to value your time more than your image. But understanding the cost is only the beginning. Awareness without action is just a slower form of suffering. Now that you've seen the wires behind the walls, you have a choice. You can go back to sleep, or you can begin the process of extraction. It's time for the final step. It's time for the Great Awakening. The truth is a heavy burden, but awareness without action is a slow poison. Most people will finish this video, feel a momentary spark of realization, and then go right back to scrolling, letting the dopamine fog settle back over their eyes. Do not be most people. Your extraction from the matrix begins in the next 48 hours. Hour 1 to 12. The forensic audit. Open your banking app. Don't look at your rent or your car payment. The system already has those. Look at the paper cuts. The $5 here, the $20 there. Highlight every recurring payment you haven't used in 30 days. These are the parasites. Kill them. Feel the visceral power of saying no to a billion-dollar corporation. Hour 12 to 24. The soldier setup. Go to your employer's payroll portal or your bank's app and set up an automatic transfer, even if it's just $50. Move it to a separate account you don't carry a card for. This is your freedom fund. You are now officially autopiloting your rebellion. The final 24 hours. The mirror. Look at your last month of spending through the lens of life force. See how many hours of your life you gave away for things that are already in the trash or forgotten. The lesson is the foundation of your new life. Discipline is not a punishment. It is the highest form of self-love. By restricting your impulses today, you are buying the freedom of your future self. You haven't reached the finish line yet, but for the first time in your life, you've stopped running in the wrong direction. You aren't just a consumer anymore. You aren't just a station for money to pass through. You are becoming the driver of your own survival. The matrix is still there, and it will try to pull you back with every notification and every sale sign. But it can't defeat a mind that has seen the code. Welcome to the real world. Welcome to the resistance. This is the invisible driver. Your journey to total autonomy has just begun.